Hi, I'm Sposito. I'm the Assistant Director for Content Strategy at the Christian Science Monitor, and welcome back to RSAC TV. With me, I have Matt Moynahan, the CEO of Forcepoint.
That's right.
You know, Matt, we were talking about how not much has changed. I mean, you've been a security executive for like 20 years. Not much has changed in sort of the threats that we've seen over perhaps your entire tenure, right?
Yeah, it seems like the lens at which we look at threats has always been through technology.
Yeah.
The antivirus market was really created by trying to chase little pieces of code around the internet and trying to stop it. It seems like that's still our mindset today, focusing on malware.
Yeah, I mean, that signature-based approach just sort of isn't working anymore, right? We see like a really dynamic adversary.
Yeah, it seems like we moved from humans creating signatures to trying to go to machine learning and automating the process.
Yeah.
That really seems to have been the innovation over the past decade or so, is trying to automate the failure of humans to keep up. But it still feels a little bit like the same old paradigm to me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that framework is really fascinating. But what I always kind of think about is like, what are we missing, right? I mean, it seems like everyone's talking about machine learning, everyone's talking about big data, right? Like, what are we missing when we kind of only focus on that approach?
Well, I think the entire security industry, has always been caught in this race to catch up. But the race is to apply security to the technological change, right? And so clouds, the development of clouds will come out, they try to secure that, or it might be apps and they try to secure that. We're always one step behind the technological change, which means almost by necessity that the hackers are one step ahead.
Yeah.
And I think what's missing is taking a step back and saying, what's the one constant despite all that change? And it really is the fact that companies, enterprises run on people.
Yeah.
Right? Until robots take over, people are at the heart of it. And we haven't really stepped back and said, how do we secure the human element inside of enterprises that relate to intellectual property, critical data, whatever it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, the perimeter, it's well established that the perimeter is porous, right? I mean, how should security executives start thinking specifically about securing users? Because we started there. We started at individual endpoints, and then we moved out to kind of the enterprise, and now it feels like we're collapsing back.
Well, I mean, I think it's very similar to what happened with Amazon and some of the online companies where they spent most of their time trying to stay up 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Then they realized that they couldn't do that, so they focused more of the time trying to say, how do I recover from a failure? The equivalent in the security space really is assume that there's folks who are inside your organization that can steal things, or that even good employees could be compromised. And so if you think like that, everyone's sort of an insider inside of your company.
Yeah.
So how do you protect intellectual property and critical data from getting out when the threat's on the inside? It's a very, very different mindset. You start thinking less around walls and antivirus, and you start thinking around what's most important. Okay, it's customer data, critical data, intellectual property. How do you protect that? And how do you stop it from getting out? And then what are the solutions you need to actually prevent that from happening? It's a different mindset.
For sure, and it kind of departs from that defense in depth mindset, right? Like just sort of checking off boxes. Well, I need a piece of antivirus. I need something that protects my firewalls. I need something that like does this other thing. I mean, how do you recognize all that anomalous behavior going on inside the network?
Well, I think if you step back and you try to look at employees or partners or customers that are on that network and say, what do they need to do to get their job done? And how do you understand workforce anomalies and behavior, and then look for things that are abnormal to that data set? It's so fundamentally different than antivirus and network infrastructure that try to look at all the events happening and then have that lead to a human. It's almost starting from the human and looking at the behavior. So I like to say I think we have a small data problem, not a big data problem.
Yeah.
There's not a good data set against the things that matter most, which are the way people interact with critical data and content, either to do their job or not, and protect against that.
So like a human point of vulnerability, right?
I mean, humans at the center of everything.
Yeah.
Whether you're an attacker. Now, there's companies that have come out and said, we need to think more like an attacker. That's getting there.
Yeah.
But I would almost encourage chief information security officer to think more like an employee.
Yeah.
What are your employees doing on a daily basis? And how do you protect that or enable that without losing intellectual property or leaking critical data?
And what do they need to do in order to do their job?
Yeah,
right. And restricting those things on certain machines. Yeah. That's just network best practices.
No, absolutely. But I mean, the technologies and the approaches to monitor workforce behavior anomalies are very, very different than what you're seeing in endpoint detection technologies or network-centric technologies, right? Those are still sort of the same old types of algorithms, maybe some machine learning. It's not really understanding you or me as a person.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally a different approach.
Yeah. I mean, these broad malware exploits still continue to happen. I know you guys had some research about how very specific attackers were using Google services as like a command and control server.
Yep.
I mean, what are you guys doing specifically to not just play a game of sort of whack-a-mole?
Yeah. Well, I think what you see with the formation of Forcepoint was two really critical types of technologies coming together. One is data leakage prevention technology, which has been around a long period of time. But essentially, that's preventing the abuse of intellectual property, right? And it's more of a prevention type of technology. That too is a little bit old world. But when you monitor the prevention element with the understanding of intent of a human being, what is the intent of a human being interacting with that content? Is it for good or is it for bad?
Yeah.
And you can infuse those types of data protection technologies with it. You have something really interesting, which is a high fidelity approach to understanding the intention of human beings who are interacting on your network and what they intend to do with the intellectual property they need to do their job or not.
Yeah.
And again, it's a nuance, but it's really an important one. It's starting from the top down and understanding human behavior much, much deeper than it is around starting at the network or the endpoint and trying to reverse engineer what
intent is so
doing.
fascinating because you're never going to buy a tool that accurately measures your employees' intent. Like you said before, right? Just harkening back to what you said before. It takes security executives really extending their empathy to their employees in order to properly protect them.
Yeah, and people change, right? I mean, if you're working for an oil company, and oil prices drop, 15%, and layoffs are coming, which we've seen time and time again over the past 2 years. What once was a good employee may change.
Yeah.
Right? Or, as we've seen with some of the most recent disclosures around the election and some of the tampering that may have happened there. Third-party nation states get involved in taking what once was a good employee and taking advantage of them at that particular time. So intent is a dynamic thing. People are dynamic. Right?
Yes.
People change. And I would say that if the security industry could get their understanding a little bit more around the human element and how that dynamic changes as time progresses, they'd be far better served than trying to catch every piece of malware on the network that may have nothing to do with stealing intellectual property.
And I think that harkens back to something you guys talk about a lot, which is insider threat.
Yep.
Traditionally we think about insider threat like there is like some sort of espionage going on, but there's all different kinds of insider threats, right?
Yeah.
Like and how do you, as a security executive or even like an operator, defend against those? I mean, could you just talk about the different kinds of insider threat?
I like to use the term inside threat instead of insider. When someone says insider, you think of a malicious employee.
Exactly, and that's not it.
Or a Snowden type of scenario, right?
Yeah.
But if you've learned anything from the military, is that the more walls you put up, the more endpoints you put up, the closer the adversary will get to the asset they're trying to steal. They're going to get inside. And if you assume that perimeter defenses aren't 100% effective against the advanced threat, then they are inside your network.
Yeah.
So I think the question is really a mindset. If whether it's a person who's turned against a company or whether it's someone who's been compromised by a nation state, or whether it's even an accidental leakage that's happened as just an unfortunate mistake, understanding that intent and behavior is just so critical to actually putting a prevention in place to stop that. So it's not just the rogue employee.
No, and obviously, like you said before, this is a people problem. It's not a data problem. It is not some sort of kind of shadowy adversary problem. It is ultimately a people problem.
No, and the cat's out of the bag, right? I mean, people are using data all over the world.
Yeah.
The fastest growing traffic and source and destination of data is from enterprises to clouds.
Yeah.
Right. To mobile devices, and so that's not. We can't put that cat back in the bag.
For sure. Just as sort of a last question, and we talked a little bit about your advice directly for security executives. Now, I mean, and obviously security is dynamic. What you can trust today is not what you can trust tomorrow. Who you can trust today is not who you can trust tomorrow. I mean, do you have any really salient advice that you provide to your customers or even your colleagues on a day-to-day basis?
I think there's a new paradigm is needed for security, and I encourage CISOs to step back and stop thinking about infrastructure and start thinking about people.
Yeah.
The people on their network. If they're touching your network, you should assume that they're in your network and start understanding what those entities on your network need to access to do their job. Lock it down.
Yeah.
And this is very, very different than trying to take a big data approach to understand everything that's happening in your network. It's fundamentally impossible to do that.
Well, sir, listen, it's been really enlightening. Thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you very
Really
much.
appreciate
Thank
you.
you.